Okay, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the budget hearing for the New Hartford 2012-2013 proposed budget. I'd like to start out with a few opening remarks. We will cover the agenda. I'll let the heads of the various schools and town give you an overview of their budget, and then after each presentation, we'll allow time for questions and answers. I am encouraging the presenters to keep their presentations to hopefully 20 minutes, say 30 minutes tops, so that we can spend a preponderance of our time hearing your input to the budget. So I would encourage the presenters to not go through it line by line, and maybe cover the highlights. And, a lot of people ask questions. Just a few basic ground rules, questions and comments. I'm going to say like 2 minutes max, but I'll tell you it's informal. I don't really try to hold anybody to a clock. If it starts going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, we'll move on, and then we'll come back and ask another question later, just to give everybody a chance to be heard. Be respectful of others' opinions. We're not all going to see it the same. That's why we're here doing that. And one thing I would say about tonight is we won't have the conflict that we've had in some of the prior years where we need to hurry through this. And the good news is we can stay for the whole meeting without interruption. The bad news is we won't be able to run home for a Final Four or a championship game. Very hard this year. Okay, can we turn back? So this is the order that we're going to go in. I'm going to give you an overview. Then it's going to be Board of Education, Board of Education, then town government. If I could, it would just take a second to have the Board of Finance members introduce themselves. We have some of the members on the board this year. I'll just start by introducing Penny Miller, our recording secretary, and the rest of you, if you could just introduce yourself.
Jim Fitzgerald. Dan Charest.
Joe Norris. Reggie Smith.
Kate Rieger.
Bill Coates.
Okay. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take you through what the initial budget requests were, the actions that the Board of Finance has taken at their last meeting, and then what the next steps are moving forward. Okay. So this page shows the requests that came in. We had an 8% increase in our assessment from Northwest Regional Center. It's really comprised of two things, and you hear more about it from them. 3.75% is the overall increase in assessments to the town, to the 4 towns. The remainder of it was simply due to the number of students going to Region 7 from New Hartford increasing, and the other towns staying the same or even decreasing. So we pick up a higher share of the budget. So that's why it's higher than the average of 3.75. 2.9% increase to the New Hartford Board of Education, 1.5% from the town government. Capital was quite a bit higher this year, 150% higher. Came from 2 pockets. $60,000 was higher, was from the town government, and $441,000 higher was New Hartford Board of Education. You see what we did to reduce some of those. Our grand list, which supports the increases, it's only a vehicle to help support the increase, let me put it that way, increased by 1.1%. It's our tax base. Resolved, we said, okay, we see your budgets, everything is fine, we're going to take it to the hearing, and if there's no major protest, we're going to go forward with it. We see a 6.26% increase in your taxes. That's what we're taking to support the budget request that I have there. Next slide, please. The actions that we took in our last meeting, Northwest Region 7 did make changes to their budget. Obviously, I'm on the board of, once the Board of Education got together, they made some cuts to it. It ended up being a reduction of $41,000 to New Hartford. That's roughly twice that amount, so $82,000 to the budget, the overall budget. We took the action, the Board of Finance took the action to reduce the New Hartford Board of Education budget down to a 1.5% increase instead of the 2.9% that I had shared with you. $71,000 was taking money out of the budget, okay? And $35,000 was simply moving it from operating budget to capital budget for some technology items to more align it with where we've been putting those kind of things for the town, so they're both in the same pocket, but we didn't cut it out of the budget, if you will. We did make significant changes to the capital, $40,000 less from the town, $351,000 less from the Board of Education. Two things I will say, the $40,000 from the town, I did receive a fair amount of feedback from people that are interested in a place for us to do youth football and some of the changes that are being done to the field house. These changes do not affect that, okay? We're planning wasn't specific where we asked to cut, but I know that Dan's plan doesn't affect those two areas in particular. $351,000, the largest came from the New Hartford Board of Education, and we're proposing, as the Board of Selectmen did, to bond the school improvement projects as opposed to a large capital appropriation. We would have had $500,000 this year, smaller amount next year, another $500,000 a year after that. You said it's kind of a lot to support in the budget. Let's do a bond project, and coincidentally, it'll tie nicely, and actually I should say by design, not coincidentally, it'll tie nicely when another existing bond is being paid off, so we won't see the forehand of that. So, also, we are moving $155,000 additional from our surplus to fund the budget. Any surplus from the prior year carried over, we do put it in the budget automatically. We put $155,000 in addition to that to mitigate the large tax increase that we said. We can do this, not affect our bond rating, and it's a prudent thing to do. Next slide. So, the overall impact after the changes that we made, subject to any feedback or any changes that we make as a result of this meeting, is a 2.75% increase in taxes versus 6% you saw previously, which amounts to $64 per $100,000 of assessed property value. That's the bottom line result of what you're going to be hearing tonight. Here's one more slide. Okay, budget approval timeline. Tonight's meeting, we do have a meeting another week to review the feedback we get either from this meeting or however we get it to make any final recommendations for the budget. And we will determine what budget number we're going to take to referendum. May 1st is the annual town meeting. That adjourns to referendum. May 7th, Region 7 is our annual district meeting. It's at Region 7 school. And that region meeting also adjourns to referendum on Tuesday. Okay, so that will adjourn to referendum as well. Then on May 8th, we will have the referendum as we have in several years, last, I don't know, quite a few years. Two separate votes on the same ballot. One, a combined vote of the town budget and New Hartford Board of Education. The other one is a separate up or down vote of Region 7. Okay? So I would encourage you to get out and vote. Polls are open on vote. We certainly appreciate your participation. Okay, I think that's it for the introduction. So the next on the agenda then is the New Hartford Board of Education. So Ryan Filthy, Dr. Ryder, is going to take us through that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Kilby, and I'm the chair of the NewHartford Board of Education. We have a few other members.
Excuse me, is that the microphone on?
I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
That would be much better, thank you.
Sorry, sure. Let me know if everyone can hear me. Once again, Brian Kilby, chair of the NewHartford Board of Education. A few other members here from the Board of Education tonight that I'd like to introduce. Over at the far side is Josh Adams, red tie. Front row is Steve Tuxbury, who's our vice chair. Melissa Giapponi is sitting next to him. Maria Watkins, who's next to her. I saw Sue London in the back and Elaine Carmelick. So I just want to let you know the Board of Education has been working very hard to submitted the budget that we have approved back on March 6th. That increase is a total of $224,000, which does represent a 2.91 increase. The main areas, the reason for that increase are $100,000 approximately lost from federal jobs funds that was used to pay for teacher salaries for the contract for last year. Approximately $81,000 in people transportation, contractual increase, as well as part of that is of this $49,000, which relates to special education busing, which we really don't have a lot of control over, but combining those two together, it's $81,000. Approximately $17,000 from the town for a pension increase. That's a bill we received from the town, we really don't have any control over. We have $22,000 in additional outplacements for tuitions, as well as we decided to increase our technology line by approximately $35,000. This is an area that in the past we've cut, and we're now looking to restore with this budget. As I said, we have produced to you a budget that we voted on as of March 6th, a budget of 2.91. I just want to kind of explain a couple things about that. One, it essentially represents 2 years' worth of increases. Last year, if you will remember, we were given an increase of approximately $129,000, which represented 1.7%, but that was given strictly for one child who moved to our town as of March of last year, high needs special education student. So the rest of the budget actually did not receive any increase. And if you factor in the fact that approximately $56,000 of that was returned to the town from the state as a result of excess cost sharing that the state returned to the town, at least basically net $72,000, which is also approximately was cut from our capital. So really, in the end, we didn't really have an increase from last year. However, we are very mindful of the tax implications of this. We're also very mindful of what the request has been made from the Board of Finance, and we intend to follow through with whatever that final request was. There's no, we will certainly do so. We actually come up with a plan to do so well before tonight's hearing. The Board of Finance called us to add an extra meeting, which we normally don't have at the end of April 24th, that we would finalize where we would be after tonight, everyone's feedback, and after the meeting next week, when I assume the final decisions will be made. So our intent is to move forward. We recognize what the Board of Finance is asking us to do. We intend to do that. There are some areas as we go through that we think we might be able to find savings within our budget as we have right now, without actually having to go further into layoffs. And as we go through that, I think those things will be more clear. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Riley, and he will go through the budget with me.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have 27 copies of our budget, so I'm going to ask you to share, one per family if you can, or one for every other person. I think if we do that, we should be fine here. Those of you that already have copies of the budget, it is the same March 6th approved budget. And those of you who don't need to see the budget, please don't take one if you want to ensure. So I'm just going to begin passing these down on both sides. In years past, ladies and gentlemen, what I have done, and as you get this budget, you'll see, I tend to speak to you and explain section by section. And at the conclusion of every section, I'll entertain questions that you may have relative to the numbers that you see on that budget. So as we're passing them around, I'm going to begin by speaking to you about the section that has the enrollment. So as you obtain your budget, open it up. And you will see on page 5, on page 6, the enrollment, that in part drives our budget for the 2012-2013 school year. As in the years past, you will notice that the New Hartford Public Schools have been slightly decreasing, and in fact, we project an enrollment of 75 children in kindergarten next year, and you will see that we're losing about 83 children from grade 6. So it's a net loss, a slight decline, if you will, and that is continuing a pattern that has begun 3 or 4 years ago here in New Hartford. And I think you've probably been reading that there are many districts throughout the northwest corner that are experiencing the same phenomenon. I live in the town of Sharon. It happens to be happening in my town as well. So those are the enrollment projections based on numbers we have now and based on the assumption that 75 children will be entering kindergarten. And that is typical of, as I said, the last 2 years. So I'm going to start, if you will, on regular education, which is page 7. All of you, or those of you that have followed the budget, know that accompanying each section of numbers is an explanation of every line item. So after tonight, if you need to go back and obtain an explanation of a particular line, you may do so. There is a narrative here for you. So Brian alluded to at the very beginning, line 111, which is at the top of page 17, is the biggest challenge to explain to the public now. Because I said to the Board of Ed months ago, I said to the Board of Finance last month, there are no new regular ed teaching positions being added to this budget this year. Well, then one would ask, why is there such a large increase in the regular ed teacher line, in that first line, 168,000? Brian mentioned to you that we lost over $100,000 in jobs fund money. The President 2 years ago gave us that additional money as a grant, as a one-year grant. The Board of Education opted not to spend it immediately, to put it in the bank, so to speak, put it towards last year's budget. Now we have to make up the difference. That's a bit of a challenge. So that's one of the differences. The other is that after the budget was approved last year by the town, the board did make some adjustments in personnel, cut some special education positions, and restore the curriculum specialist positions. So that also is a reason for that large difference. So people may want to think that we're adding regular ed positions. We're not. This is no new positions in the proposed for next year's budget. So you can see there's no other large increases on page 7. We're going to proceed to page 8. Again, very typical spending patterns as have been in previous years for regular education supplies, for materials, for textbooks, for the services that, some of the small extra services that we may use for children. You'll see that there are no large increases there. There is a small decrease, and this is just one of those notes I want to make to you tonight. Line 313, right at the top of page 8. There is a small reduction in the correct Montessori magnet school. Some of you may know that New Hartford has families who have opted, their choice, to send their child to a magnet school sponsored by the state of Connecticut and run by our Capital Region Education Council, correct? And in doing that, we become responsible one way or the other for the tuition. I say we, taxpayers. So the Board of Education last fall decided that they would not be funding those students who are attending Montessori Magnet School, that they would opt for the state to withdraw that from our regular money that we receive each year from the state. So rather than include it in the budget, put the responsibility of the state to take it from its annual payment that they give to the town for public education. And we had notified the Board of Finance that we were doing it.
Philip, if I may just add to that a little bit, we also have engaged in a lawsuit with several other districts, actually challenging this assessment upon us with regard to any sort of preschool program. So we are actually, not only are we not funded, but we're actually pursuing it in other ways through litigation to actually minimize this impact to our town. So it's kind of a multiple thing here. That to me is more the important reason why it's not in here, is because we're actually challenging it in court. So currently it's in with the State Department of Education. I should step back. We started in court, but it got bumped back to the State Department of Education, where it's being challenged currently. Where it ends up, I'm not sure. Hopefully where it's going to finally end up, but that's where it is right now.
And then if you proceed to page 9, that's the conclusion of the regular education budget. And this is the point where I would entertain any questions that you may have about any one of those particular lines or anything that I may have said that you have a question about. Yes, sir.
state's gonna deduct the money from what you're entitled to from them, that means the amount of money that you get from the state is gonna be less. How's that reflected in the budget?
That would be reflected in the amount of income that that the Board of Finance would put in their budget. Right. That's why I said that we had noted to the Board of Finance that we were embarking on this lawsuit. Any other questions about regular education? All right, then we move to special education. Now, where you saw the increase in regular education, due in part to some position changes, you'll see in that first line a reduction in our special education teaching for the same reason, just moving of positions, people who may have higher salaries or lower salaries than the teacher who happened to occupy that position in the previous year. The significant change that you see here, the Director of Student Services, when I began as superintendent of schools, we had a full-time Director of Student Services 3 or 4 years ago in one of those tough cost-saving years, one of those tough cuts that we had to make. We reduced that position, and each year we've tried to increase it a little bit back to the full-time position, because as you may understand, the numbers of children with special education services has increased, both in our town and throughout the state of Connecticut, and in fact, in our country. In addition to that, the responsibility for teaching these children has also increased. So special education services, it is vitally important for us to have a director of special education services to manage some of these very severe and very significant children with learning disabilities and their programs, some of which occur outside of our district. So that's the justification for that one. This is an area we really try to watch. As a superintendent of schools, I have to tell you that I'm talking with my director of student services on a daily basis. Things change, it seems, very often because there are children whose ed plans, whose educational programs will greatly impact our budget. So we're always looking to do the right thing for kids, but trying to find the least costly option so that we can minimize the impact on our budget, because they're rather large expenses usually. So I'll move on to page 11. We have online 560 tuitions. I think Brian Kilty alluded to the fact that we have children whose educational needs require so much profound direct service that we can't do that in our district, and they must go to a specialized school. So that's that tuition line, and in fact, we have an increase in one student who will be outside of the district receiving the instruction that child needs. That's one increase. And then the evaluations and other services that are required have also increased. And then on page 12, I don't think there's anything significantly different from the years past. And in fact, you see that there's an overall decrease in special education, despite what I have been saying. But that is that cost savings with some of the teacher moves that we have made. Are there questions about special education? Those two are really the largest pieces of this budget. Adult education, page 13. That every community in the state of Connecticut is required to offer some sort of educational program for the adults in the community. We used to work with Roger in Region 7, I believe, and try to provide a regionalized adult education program. We have since, even prior to my tenure here, 7 years, we now outsource that to Education Connection in Litchfield. They run the program for us, and that's the cost that we pay them. I'm moving to page 14, health services. You'll see that there are no changes in lines other than salaries. We have a new nurse at a school, a new lead nurse, if you will, and then we also, the Board of Education, provided a $1.6 instruction, again, you'll see very few changes in this section of the budget. And in fact, very few changes over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. This area of the budget is to enhance the work that we do with teachers for their professional learning and the work that we do for curriculum. We have 3 or 4 rather large pieces to accomplish in the next 4 years, and that's every state, every town in the state of Connecticut, every Board of Ed and school district. We have a rather large curriculum implementation process that must begin or has begun already for our Common Core state standards. 47 states have approved a set of new standards for math and for literacy. Those must be implemented by the year 2014-15 because students will begin the second large piece, and that is the testing that will be required. The testing will be very different than what we have right now. If you've heard of CAT, which is the high school test, or CMT, which is the elementary and middle school test, in the year 2014-15, they will no longer be present, and we will be required to provide tests on computers for kids using technology. That's happening right now. So that's a huge change, and we have to begin now to make those changes. And then technology is another rather large change, and I'll speak to that as we go forward. Any questions about improvement of instruction? All right, I'm going to move on to page 16, our library media centers. The one big change on page 16, 17, 16 and 17, the numbers have stayed relatively constant over the last few years. We've had some additional requests for books for our library, and we've tried to accommodate that request from our library media center coordinators. And that's really the only rather large change, or relatively speaking, the large change that you see in these 2 pages on page 16. If you will. Questions about our library material? Then we move to technology on page 18. Brian alluded to the fact that one of the large increases this year is a $35,000 increase in technology. My initial proposal was $50,000, we'll cut it back to $35,000. Again, this is one of those rather large pieces that I believe we have to move forward. We have to embrace the fact that the devices that we use as adults, kids need to learn how to use for educational purposes, and in fact, our district has begun to launch a new initiative in technology, and we would like to support that with a modest increase, frankly, over the next few years, so that we can replace some of the machines that are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old that are in our buildings now. Last year, this line was 0, so the $35,000 is year 1 of that, sort of restoring it to where it has been in the past. Questions about technology? All right, we're going to move on to page 19, Board of Education. And in fact, you'll see a rather large decrease in Board of Education. Your board members, in addition to serving the board and going to meetings twice a month or regular board meetings, they also have subcommittees. And one of the subcommittees is personnel and negotiation. Your board has just literally spent hours and hours and hours renegotiating contracts with teachers, our paraprofessionals, our tutors, our secretaries, and our custodians. And in doing that, you will see the fact that now that they've completed those negotiations, we no longer need an attorney to help us implement the contract. That's our job as a district to do that. So that's why we've reduced the legal fees, the anticipation that we don't have to renegotiate contracts next year, or in fact in the next 3 years, which is a good thing. Any questions about Board of Education expenses? All right, we move to page 20, which is our central office. Again, all central office staff, including the superintendent of schools, line has been increased by 1.5%. Those raises have not been approved by the Board of Education and will be driven by evaluations. The Board of Ed evaluates me in May and June and will decide whether or not I deserve that increase, and I will evaluate my office personnel. So right now, that is a placeholder, if you will, for an anticipated raise. And that's the way we have done it in the past, although this is the first year, for several years, the central office staff have taken a 0%. Questions about page 20? Right. Page 21 is a continuation of the central office. Again, no rather, I don't think any surprises to how we're spending money or projecting spending. Our school offices, you'll see that there is a decrease in principal salaries. We have hired the second principal, our second new principal. We hired Amanda Shaw last year to take over Anthony School. We have a new principal for the 2 primary schools as Steve Nato is retiring. And of course, we can bring in a new principal at a lower rate. So therefore, we have reduced that salary line. There's a modest increase in secretaries. Again, that's that 1.5% increase that I alluded to earlier. And again, no real significant changes from previous years for our building expenses. Any questions? So we move to page 23 in our plant operations. And plant operations, I said special education and regular ed are complex. I suppose this would qualify as complexity as well. 3 pages of, and we try to be as detailed as possible for you, for the public, so that you better understand. We have 5 custodians for our 3 buildings, and we have had 5 custodians since I began as superintendent of schools. Again, there's a 1.5% increase for those custodians negotiated by the Board of Education. And each year, a significant amount of my office time is spent talking with Roger and lots of other business managers throughout the Northwest corner to see how I can reduce expenses for this particular section. If you explore the electricity line over the last half a decade, 5-6 years, you'll notice that for the most part we have decreased it. We've upgraded our energy saving process. We have tried to conserve in different ways, and so each year we've been able to reduce some of our utility usage, and that's reflected again in this projected budget for the coming year. But naturally there is always a need for emergency repairs. Line 406, which is the last line on page 23, that typically is a line that's overspent because there are emergency needs, boilers, windows, doors, roof patching, whatever it may be. 2-foot snowfalls in October. Lots of things that you don't anticipate. So we put a number in there as a if you will. Very typically that's a number that is overspent. On page 24, there's a complete listing of some of the maintenance projects that were small maintenance projects, not the capital projects, but small maintenance projects that we would like to accomplish. These have been submitted by each of the 2 principals and modified a little bit in the central office to reduce some of the costs, but we try to follow up with these because we know how important it is to continue to maintain our buildings. And then on page 25, our list of our contracted services, and again, we try to reduce these. We go out for competitive bids, we try to push companies to give us a better service for less money and be more competitive in doing it. This year, we have reduced the copy machine. And some may say, well, what does that do? Well, it does actually save us about $4,500. We are relying more greatly on email, on using paperless environments. All of our notices are sent home now, not by paper, but by an email every Friday afternoon. In fact, they're on our webpage as well, so people can access the news. So we really have tried this year to reduce the amount of paper that we use and the amount of copy, and so we reduced the copy machine. On page 26, we continue. Line 692, heating oil. Boy, did we dodge a bullet this year. Unfortunately, the weather was such that we didn't overexpend oil. I was worried about it last year. For those of you that were here, I think you heard me say that. God only knows what it's going to be next year. It really is a guess. But we tried to do. We have a new boiler at Angelini, and I think we are beginning to see some results as a follow-up, or as a result of having a new boiler at Angelini School. And that, I believe, is plant operations. Any questions about anything that I've mentioned or any of those lines?
Dr. Wright? Yes, on the REACH grant for the technology of $35,000, whether there's a $22,000 change amount, is that a pass-through grant?
For those, the question that Reggie is asking is a good one, thanks, I forgot to mention that. When you see red underlined with an additional line item number, it means that that line is fortified additionally by what we call pass-through grant. In other words, it's typically a federal money that comes to the town literally, but it is directed for the Board of Education use. It's never guaranteed. Federal funds are never guaranteed. And they sometimes go down, they sometimes are increased. Typically in the last few years they've been going down. So that is what we project for additional spending on that line. So that for technology, Reggie pointed out, there is an additional amount of money from our REAP grant, which is a grant that's given to very small districts with 600 or fewer students. All right, and then the second to the last section is employee benefits. One of the other things that the Board of Education spent a lot of time doing in the negotiation process this year was reducing the benefit costs. That's something that we've seen increase year after year after year. They have taken off the table the current options for teachers and all employees and reduced the cost of the options for our employees. So that that's why on that first line there you see that it is not increased at all, despite the fact that our insurance rates did go up. The fact that the options that the teachers and the rest of the employees have are less costly options, like for instance a high deductible health care plan or a fully managed plan for their prescriptions. So that was they've spent a significant amount of time trying to negotiate those cost reductions in fact that's reflected here in the budget. The large increase in pension fund has to do with the switch in responsibility, so to speak, if you will, from the fact that we have a greater number of people to support for our pension fund as opposed to the town. It's a split bill every year. The first selectman and I negotiate or talk about how that bill is actually not a negotiation. It's based on the numbers of people who participate in our pension plan. Again, your Board of Education, like your first selectman, have negotiated those pensions out. And so hopefully in the next few years we'll begin to see some reduction in those costs. So that's your benefits. And then your last page would be your communications, I believe. And that, in fact, oh, I'm sorry. The transportation costs are similar as in previous years. However, there is an increase in our regular education transportation because the bus contract over year 3 of the bus contract and the first 2 years the Board of Ed received each year an incentive from the bus company, a reduction in cost. So this year we moved to the actual budget, the actual cost for transportation services. And I misspoke. I said that there aren't any other changes, I believe, in the transportation for special education. Again, because we transport children outside the district for special education, in some cases, we often have to pay their transportation costs as well. So that is the thing about transportation. And then the last page, if you will, 2010 and 11, not 11, 12, 10, 11. It's about 13,404. That is about $700 less than the average cost per people in the state of Connecticut. And it also, when I give you the cost per people, it includes Region 7's cost as well. So it's not, I didn't break it down for elementary and for in-school. Questions that you have about this budget that I presented? If you have any, feel free to stop by the office, pick up the phone, email me. This budget is also on our webpage. And as indicated by Brian, the board will be looking at it for further reductions as directed by the Board of Finance at our April meeting, at our next meeting, which is April 24th.
The hope is to basically take some of the stuff that's been here and reduce some of these line items without actually going to council personnel. Some of the areas that we're looking to reduce is we could still very well have some retirements. They tend to not come until after this period, after the town has decided what they're going to do with the budget. Then we see the retirements. That's what we saw 2 years ago, and we got 3 of them afterwards. Other areas that we're looking to that we may see some savings on is that while we negotiated new health care plans, it's a little hard to see that to find exactly what those figures are going to be when the health care plans that were existed before are no longer in existence. So where's that going to end up? We really don't know. So I think we can certainly budget it there a little bit, so there could be some savings there, as well as the transportation. I know Dr. O'Reilly is going to be presenting information possible on reducing the bus, as well as there's a chance possibly we can talk to the town, Dan and Gordon, possibly about seeing if there's a way to front the bus money and as 1 month payment and get some sort of credit back. I don't know if that's going to be a viable situation or not, but what I'm trying to get across is that even though we approved this thing on March 6th, we continually try to find ways to save within our additional budget. This is my 5th budget season now, and every 5 years, I've been looking to make cuts to our budget. It's not an easy task. It's not easy for anyone involved. We do it over 5 years to get better at it. It actually becomes harder. It's not something you can, practice makes perfect. It doesn't work in this scenario. The cuts get harder and harder and harder to make. We're trying to minimize the impact to the services that we provide and minimize the impact to our employees. We're also, many of them who are residents of this town are also taxpayers of this town. So we're still trying to focus in on various areas and come up with a package after we finally get the end result of what all these meetings will be. The other side of this is the Board of Education viewpoint that we would prefer not to move our technology from operational capital, and that's something we want to present to the Board of Finance too. I think it's in our interest to keep it there. We look at technology as being more of a learning tool, and it's not something we think is, while it has a lot of the capital characteristics, it's something that we think is a worthy investment. We have been able to fund in the past, and we'd like to keep it in our operational budget because we think it's more of a learning tool rather than windows and doors or something like that that mostly fit into a capital sort of definition. So that's where we stand. We will be, revisiting this on April 24th. This was a plan that we presented our calendar back in the fall. Every year we've done this, and especially with the cuts, there's no perfect way of doing it. We see various criticisms for going about different ways. I think this is a better plan because it's going to get the most timely budget to referendum that voters can best decide. It's actually, the idea is to get to the voters what they see, which will be as most timely as we can get as of April 24th to present to voters in the beginning of May. So in years past, we've had budgets that the numbers start in January, and they don't really get revised or anything until they don't get revised at all, or sometimes they don't get revised until after the budget season. And our hope is to basically present the best possible budget we can for the voters in the beginning of May. So, and just as another side, I just want to thank everyone involved. My board's been working really hard. I appreciate all the work of the Board of Finance. Ben Maybe has stepped up hugely this year, working with us with our teacher negotiations. Katie Fisicali's not here. She was our chair with that. Steve Coxberry is our our vice chair with that, but he was actively involved with that. A ton of work involved with that. This is tough. And I do appreciate all the Board of Finance members and really the Board of Selectmen and everyone in this town. And this town's a great place to live. We all know that. It all comes from people who are willing to step up to the plate, work really hard, volunteer their time and effort, and try to do the best we can for everyone here. So I do thank everyone who's involved. Sure.
How much do you
current year? I believe we have made expenditures that are not going to have any money left for this particular year.
The board has directed me 2 or 3 meetings ago, Maria, to begin to get prices for completing a few projects that have been presented to the town that never funded in the past. One of them would be, there are 2 additional air handlers that must be replaced at Annex School. Every other air handler has been replaced for the last 10 years. So that's one. Another one was the asbestos abatement. We have a couple of floors that still, whose tile must still be removed, and the carpeting removed, and then the tile put down. So those were 2 projects that they wanted me to look into with the existing money that is in the capital. So it's really, I don't know what is going to roll over, and if any will be, it will depend on whether the board supports the numbers that I bring forward.
And those projects was mentioned on the capital that was related to the 175,000?
No, these are not the library project or the air handler project, no.
Okay, are there any other questions from the public on the local board of education budget before we move on to Region 7? Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to take a second to set up the presentation for the regional board of education budget. And Judy, all of us from the county and Valley, Saxon Region, Board of Education here will be making a presentation.
Thing's amazing how it, I mean, you can barely see some of the shots but their faces, I don't know even it keeps the color.
Yeah, you really see it. Close up to the face, you really see the quality, the color of the skin.
And then it gets a little grainy.
My name is Molly Sexton Reed, and I'm the chair of the Board of Education at Northwestern. This is Dr. Julie Palmer, who's our superintendent. Roger Newberry is our finance director. The 2 members here can't hear you. I'm going to try and speak up as soon as it calms down. Let me know. If not, I'll go to the microphone. I'm just more comfortable here, but I'll try and speak loudly. Rob Jerem and Noel Goffier are the 2 New Hartford representatives who serve on our board, and they're here with us tonight as well. The presentation that I have to share with you tonight is the same presentation that we take to all 4 of the towns. We have a tradition of doing this during budget season. We've been to Norfolk and Mark Hampstead. We will York tomorrow, and obviously we're here tonight. And then we will do this presentation one last time on April 23rd up at the high school, which is when our budget hearing is held. So we'll start. With that, I will also pass out some budgets for you. Before I get started on this year's budget, I had asked the administration to create a couple of slides just to sort of review where we've been for the past few years. So these are just the budget increases over the last 4 years. Obviously, 2008, 2009 was the last of the glory days. And then we've had 3 either no increases or what feel like minimal increases to us. These small budgets or these low increases have had an effect on the school. And one of the ways that we see the effect is the reduction in teaching staff. So in 2008, we had 104.3 full-time equivalent teaching positions. We are down this year to 99.2. You will see in this budget there are a couple of less than part-time additions, which will bring the number up a bit. We are also facing, with some trepidation, the retirement of our long-time finance director, who we have been having his services at a full-time level, but only having to budget for a part-time position. So 0.6 of that increase for this in this budget will be reflects the fact that it is a full-time position. In hiring someone new, we will need to pay them full-time. So if you take that out of the mix, you can see that we are still down about 4 teachers or full-time equivalents with basically the same number of students. So these past 3 years have had an effect on our school and on the program that we are able to offer our students. As a Board of Education and the administration have worked hard to minimize the impact on the students, but it can't be denied that there has been some. So, going into building this budget, what were we thinking about? What were we considering in the creation of this budget? Basically, the number of students coming from the 4 towns will stay the same. We now offer in the high school only 7 advanced placement classes. It's low for a school of our size. Advanced placement classes offer graduating seniors an opportunity to earn either college credit or at least placement in higher level college courses, depending on where they go on to school. They are an important piece of the education for our top achieving students. We are looking to increase that by 2 classes. Right now, the 7th grade classes receive 16 hours of art a year. That's a direct result of the reduction in staff. We used to have 4 full-time art teachers, we now have only 2. What we have put in this budget is a part-time art teacher in order to increase the amount of art our 7th graders are receiving. 16 hours a year is just not enough. The high school is also in the process of going through the NEASC accreditation process, and so that is a consideration for us in building this budget in terms of what programs we offer, what electives we make available, the structure of our school. Achieving that accreditation is important for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, they recommend best practice, and that is our goal, is always to provide the best education we can for our students. The other piece is, again, for our graduating seniors. The colleges to which they are applying are going to look to see if the high school they are coming from is accredited. It explains to the college the level of the programs that these students have been offered. Our students will be hurt if we don't meet this accreditation. So that's a part of what we've thought about in trying to put this together. We have an increase in special education costs. So the case correctly. We need to maintain the facilities. It's one of the areas of the budget that during these lean years has been trimmed, appropriately so, but it's also important that we not let it go too far. Otherwise, we will find ourselves in a position with a deteriorating building that needs major work. Obviously, the increased cost of oil, everyone knows what that means. The drop in tuition students, what that refers to is that we have had a relationship with the Winchester school system where we have been able to provide programs for some of their special education students that they were not able to provide within their district. and we receive tuition payments from Winchester for those programs. Winchester has now decided that they would like to build those programs in-house, so they will no longer need to send those students to us. So this drop in tuition appears in a drop in revenue on the page 10 of the budgets that you have there. That has an impact on our budget. There is a 3.3% increase in our teachers' contract. Last year, the teachers had a hard zero. They received no increase in step or in a general wage increase. This year, there is an increase in their contract. High school reform refers to the High School Reform Act, which is a piece of state legislation, which is, as it stands right now, mandating that for students entering our school in 2016-17, those students will need to complete 25 credit hours in order to graduate. Right now, the minimum requirement is 21. There are also a series of specific classes that they need to take. All of those things will involve more staff. If we are to provide those additional classes and credit hours for our students, we are going to have to increase our staff. There just simply isn't any other way around it. It's been important to me as chair to sort of keep that at the front of people's minds. Obviously, it's not something we have to do tomorrow, but it is also something I don't want to wait until the last minute to do. If we put it off until we have to do it, it's going to be a big increase. So we've been trying to keep a mindful eye on that, trying maybe to build in a little bit at a time. And then obviously the continuing economic conditions within our towns, understanding that grant lists have barely gone up, if they've gone up at all, and understanding the effect that has on our communities. Given all those considerations, this is a graphic that just sort of illustrates pictorially the way our budget is spent. Obviously, the majority of it is spent on staff. Education is a people-heavy business. I will go through this, each sort of similar to the way Dr. O'Reilly did. Each section is numbered, and these are just sort of general statements. You have the specifics in front of you. So the 100s are the salary lines. So we have a contractual obligation to our teachers, and then these are the additional things that I was discussing before. So there's a part, point 4, middle school art teacher position that's included in here. There's a point 2, so 2/10 of a full-time teacher, to enable us to offer these 2 extra high school advanced placement classes. We are also looking to increase the staff at our VOAG program by 1 additional teacher. That is, in effect, a revenue gain for us. By increasing the staff there, we not only provide better services for our students, but we open up more spots for tuition-paying students. There, generally speaking, is a waiting list to get into our VOAG program, so we will be able to fill those additional spots. That tuition will more than cover the cost of that teacher. And then, obviously, the other salary line is what I was referring to today. It is making the finance director position whole on a salary basis. The 200s are our benefits, including health insurance and unemployment. There is a slight reduction in that line for these 2 reasons. There's a reduction in the amount of unemployment insurance that we anticipate having to pay, and the health insurance line is also one of the places going through this budget looking for places where there were surpluses and trimming them and budgeting them more conservatively. And that's what we've done. The professional technical services refers to our special education. While there is an increase in our costs, the administration has made the decision this year in terms of a bookkeeping mechanism to include within our budget the applied excess cost grant, which is money that we get from the state that pays for the special education costs we have over and above a certain number. And so previously that amount of money was reflected on the revenue page. We've now built it directly into the budget, which is where most districts build it. And so as a result, in this line item, there's actually, or in this group of line items, there's actually a reduction. Property services includes a lot of things, including electricity. We continue to be able to recognize some savings from the solar panels that are installed on the roof. Other purchase services is increased slightly. Those two reasons there. There are an increasing number of students from our 4 towns who are attending the technical school in Torrington, and it is our responsibility to provide tuition for them to get to that school. So there's an increase in that line item. Also, we anticipate, we have 6 now, and we anticipate that going to probably about 10 students who are going to Hartford Arts Magnet School in Hartford, and we are responsible for paying part of their tuition. So under supplies, the biggest increase here is that we've added an additional $50,000 to maybe cover the increase in the cost of heating oil. As the local board of education was saying earlier, no one knows if this is going to be enough. We'll keep our fingers crossed. The 2 other requests that were made that the administration would like to meet. One is using an iPod language lab. What that would mean is that then, rather than teachers having to take classes physically to one of the 2 language labs we have now, they would be able to use that software within the classroom, and in that way broadening the number of students at any one given time in language classes who can use that kind of technology, and then an increase in what we need for special education testing and classroom supplies. I don't need to read the slide to you, so property is down a little bit. We move some items to the capital. These 2, the 800 and the 900, those 2 balance out. They balance each other out, and what that reflects is that in an effort to save money, the administration was able to refinance one of our bonds so that there is a decrease in the amount of interest and an increase in the amount of principal. Once you add them together, it comes to about a $9,000 a year saving for 10 years. So $90,000 overall. That's the second piece of it. So that's what those 2 lines represent. We do have, at the moment, a capital plan in place for this budget. This $200,000 would be a bond that we would borrow. So what's built into the budget is what that first year payment would be on it. At the suggestion of Roger and Dr. Palmer, we have been looking at the possible conversion of our heat to natural gas. Connecticut natural gas line comes pretty close to the school building in Winston. And as most people know, at this point right now, natural gas is substantially less expensive than heating oil. And so we are investigating that possibility. It would probably require a 2-year approach to it. In the first year, we would look to convert the boilers to dual fuel so that we continue burning the heating oil as long as we need to. And then in next year's capital plan, look to bring the line up from Winstead and into the building. Mr. Newberry's been in conversation with CNG about what they would be willing to kick in towards that process. Obviously, it seems obvious to me anyway, we would be a big customer for them. And one would hope that that would be an incentive for them to assist us with the cost of bringing the line up the hill and finding a way to bring it into the building. The other projects that are listed here are all things that need to happen. The priority of them hasn't been finalized yet. Anyone who's been up to the school building recently recognizes that that carpeting in the front hall, when you first come into the building, it's 12 years old and it's been walked on by a lot of people and it needs to be replaced. There's a bathroom downstairs in the high school wing that looks like it's been a high school boys' bathroom since 1972. It needs to be renovated. The sweeper refers to a custodial piece of equipment, and the stage curtain is another possible capital expenditure, and that is both an aesthetic piece and it's also a fire safety piece. But as I say, those are the administration's projections right now, the priorities. We haven't is on page 10, I don't have it up on the slide here. And what the biggest changes on that I've already touched on. One is you'll see an increase in the revenue that we receive for the GOAD program, and that is by the increase of the number of students we can, tuition-paying students we can bring in with the additional teacher, and also an increase in the state grant because we will have more students. There is a big reduction in revenue because the Winchester students will not continue to come up and receive services from us. The administration continues to be creative with trying to find ways to bring revenue in, understanding that any revenue we can bring in directly reduces the assessment that we send out to the 4 towns. Along with shared services, Dr. Palmer has expanded the Highlander Academy, which is the services that are provided for special ed students from 18 to 21. They've opened a second campus for that, allowing them again to bring in more tuition-paying students to help offset our costs. We accept Heartland students as tuition-paying students and continue to work with Heartland to try and bring as many of their students to our high school as we can. The administration also has worked hard to find ways to enhance our program that don't impact the budget. The most dramatic of which this year has been the creation of our first robotics team, which Dr. Palmer applied for and received grants to cover the cost of initiating that team, and that team finished as the first rookie team at the regional competition in Hartford last weekend or the weekend before, which is a wonderful success for all of us. Kids are really excited. They're going to nationals in St. Louis, and again, grants are sought and applied for in order to subsidize that program, offer those opportunities for our students without impacting the budget. As Ben Whitty showed you in the first slide, this is a big year for New Hartford in terms of our budget. And this slide demonstrates, as best we can, the historical perspective on the way the student population shifts and the way those shifts affect each town's assessment. What has happened in this budget that we're formulating right now is that there will be 19 more students from New Hartford, and there will be 24 fewer students from the other 3 towns. So that's a student swing of 43 students, which has this dramatic effect. And as you can see, Holbrook and Norfolk routinely undergo these shifts because they have such a small population. It doesn't take many kids to change it for them. Some of this is predictable, a lot of it isn't. We do our best to stay in touch with all 4 towns about what's forecast in terms of student population. But as we all know, people move in, move out. There's no hard numbers to be had, and this is just the way it is for this year. We understand that for whichever one of our 4 towns is getting hit in that particular year, it's a difficult situation. And you can see, in Barkhamsted, there are actually fewer students, and yet their assessment will go up by almost 3%. Again, because it's not just what happens to your town, but it's what happens to everybody else's that shifts the percentages around. So, we've added this slide tonight just to hopefully further explain sort of how this all happens here in New Hartford for this year. If our budget was the same as it was this present year, New Hartford's budget would still go up over $400,000 because of the student swing. The student swing affects the increase in the budget, and then the compounding thing of the loss of revenue from Winstead. And up there would be an increase in New Hartford's budget, even if we were at 0, of over $400,000. So if you take that piece of it out and look at the effect of this 2% budget increase, which is what this budget represents, the budget increase for New Hartford student swing and the loss of revenue piece is $184,000. Any questions about any of that? Yep.
Just a quick question. I think it was last year, we learned, we're the only high school in Litchfield County that are in Silver Meadow. Is that right? Yeah, it's a report. The only high school in Litchfield County that are any high school, as far as I can see.
I believe that's accurate.
So we need to add a lot of stuff to make it work for us. I don't know why you want to add a lot of staff if we're doing pretty well right now in government.
Good question. We're not adding a lot of staff. Really what we're adding is a .4 social studies teacher and a .4 art teacher. And the .4 art teacher really will have it, that effect will be on the middle school, which wasn't a part of the silver medal award. And then there's the .2 social studies.
That's a huge salary increase, so.
Yeah, built into that is the 3.3 contractual increase and making the finance director whole are the two things. So in terms of teaching staff at the high school, what we're looking at is .6 complete. So it's not a lot of staff. So do you want to?
No, I was just going to say that when you hire people on who are just coming in to teach a class or two, there's no benefits involved with that, just straight salary. And we'll be looking at people coming right out of school.
This just gives you historical perspective on sort of how the students bounce around, up, down, between the four towns over time. So the educational proposals in this budget are the .4 middle school art teacher, .2 addition to the high school social studies, and one additional VOAG teacher. And the additional VOAG teacher also comes as a multi-year recommendation from their accrediting body that the staff that we have right now is really stretched beyond their maximum. They've been asking us to increase the staff there to keep that program as well run as it has been for a while. So we have some substantial increase in special ed costs, looking at things like the Highlander House, which is a new campus in Winstead, which offers, there's one in Torrington, right? Yes, the other. Right. Is at UConn Torrington. This one is in Winstead and focuses on living skills for that population of students. And the assessments changed a couple of times. So, as I said, this is our third presentation of our budget at the four towns. And we bring it to the four towns in an effort to give people as much information as possible, as many opportunities to give us feedback, ask questions as possible. The final go-around of this will be at our budget hearing, which will be on April 23rd. It's at that meeting that our board will vote on a budget that will go to referendum. And as somebody said earlier, it will go to referendum the same day as Hartford's town budget will go to referendum. We did take a vote at our board meeting a month ago, 2 weeks ago, I don't know. I feel like we meet every week, so I'm not sure which meeting it was. But that decision has been made formally and voted on. So we are definitely going to referendum. Budget meeting gets adjourned to go to referendum. Questions? Yes.
What is the percentage of students that go to regional from New Hartford?
You mean how many of our students are New Hartford students?
Yeah, what's the
It's
percentage?
like 0.49.
What, the ADM ratio here is 0.5051. Is that the percentage or is the?
No, that's
That's the percentage of students. So it's, excuse me, it was 50.51 students as of last October 1st. By statute, that's what your assessment is based on. So as of last October,
That tells me that we have more than 50% of the students.
right.
Yeah. And why don't we have more than 50% of the vote?
sign on of the students in the building, and it gets
So
multiplied.
we're paying more than 50% of the bill, but we're only getting 49% of the vote?
Because that's how many people live in towns. The weighted voting is done by population of towns, not by population of the school.
Is that state statute governs that?
It is, and we just had our numbers verified based on this most recent census and verified by the state.
I have trouble sitting here calmly listening to that. I really do. It's ridiculous. We're paying more than 50% of the bill. We should have 50% or more of the vote power. So
Afraid we're at the wrong setting.
I think we need to write our legislation.
There was another question over here.
Thank you.
What is the student population this year, and what is the projection for next year?
I think it's down by 5 students. 5. There'll be 5 fewer students next year, is our projection.
Any other questions or comments for Regent 7 before we move on to something else?
Ben, can I just, before we move on? I know it's a public hearing, so I encourage people to speak up, to ask questions, and to, go to the next meeting as well. But I'm still concerned myself regarding Region 7. And I've said this before, I think the number's way too high. I think that it's misleading looking at the $587,000 relative to a shift in 19 students. It's a shift in 19 students for us, that's the increase. It does not come up to $587,000. The balance of that money obviously is coming from the general increase based on their salaries and the rest of the increases that are taking place. But I think this could be spread over a couple of years. Some of the things that are very concerning, for example, I got a lot of respect for Roger for all the time and effort that he's working up there on a part-time basis. $58,000 versus going to $110,000 overnight, just like that, and bringing Roger back as a consultant next year. It's unheard of. Look at the size of this budget, look at the size of the local budget. We don't have a finance director here. This is the day and the age of technology and automation. It should be a matter of just press these buttons and, probably crunching someone from an analytical standpoint. But we shouldn't be in this situation. Next year, that number is going to be, you'll be asking for 2 or 3%, and then another 2 or 3% on top of it. And the next thing you know, we're just overloaded with administrative staff. And the decrease in the population from a student standpoint is still happening. I think we can reduce this. I would like to see this number for New Hartford to be reduced to only our assessment, which means you should reduce the entire budget to 0 to the district. We'll take the assessment. There's no reason for it. Everybody else is struggling. The people are not able to say, hey, I'm receiving 1.5, 2.5, or 3%. All of these budgets, everybody's receiving increases. Probably with the exception of people that are out there working outside of the education system in municipalities. And I think people still need a break. I don't see a turn in this market or in the industry or in the economy. And I think you have to do something. And if the people don't get what they want here tonight, then their option is at the referendum.
I understand your point and respect your opinion. 2 things I just want to clarify, that it is, the increase for New Hartford in terms of students is only 19, but that increase is compounded by the reduction in the other 3 towns. So it is a swing of 43 in that sense. New Hartford doesn't have 43 new students, but it is a shift in terms of the proportions within that collection of students. So it's compounded. So that's how it gets to be that big of a number. The other piece in terms of the finance director, the other way to look at that is to recognize that for the last 10 years at least, the district has reaped the benefits of having a full-time employee who we pay part-time. This increase, we recognize it as a big jump, but our district and regional districts, generally speaking, are complicated animals, and it requires a full-time person, and that's what we've in fact had. We've had the luxury of not having to pay for it. We now have to pay for it. The administration is working hard to make sure that that transition happens smoothly. Obviously, Mr. Newberry has been a part of regional for a very long time, and has an enormous amount of institutional knowledge that we respect and that we will continue to use.
have an effect on the amount of staff that we need. It sort of has to happen for a while. For us to have 5 fewer students in a student body of nearly 1,000, it's not going to change our staffing needs dramatically. If it continues to trend that way, and we see the numbers have dropped significantly over a period of time where we, have very small classes or have teachers who we don't need, then certainly we'll address that. But right now, any changes that are, in single digits for sure, we can't. They don't call for a change in staff. And we have a reduction right now. We're down 5 positions, and even if we add what we put back in, we're still down 4 with basically the same students.
I think some of the concern is, you're looking at a huge amount of money for a small town. And when you start talking to things in this town, we either have children that have been in the school, are going to school, or going to be in school. Every one of us have done all 3. You're showing the increase in students, but yet you have a financial director that's part-time. He's leaving. You have an opportunity to just cut that out of the budget for right now. Doesn't mean you can't add it at your part-time. As the economy starts to improve, then start adding a lot of these things. Having an art teacher go from part-time to full-time, that would be fantastic for them to do more creativity, work as a full-time art student. But we're asking the town to put in $587,000. I don't look at the budget yet. I mean, we've asked our board that, and they cover $71,000 this year. I have 2 kids in that. I mean, and I got concerned, but you know what? That's what the town needs to do right now. It's the economy. And I would love to see you guys really look at the budget. I want the best education. I had fantastic education there. But as a taxpayer, really, I commend you on the job you're doing. It's not easy. But again, you're talking to small towns that you have a lot of friends that are struggling to just stay in this town. You want to raise this in this town.
I understand. Right now, what we have is a full-time finance who we pay. I just want that to be clear. We're not changing the nature of that. We just haven't.
But Molly, there are probably a lot of people out there who'd be more than happy to jump into something like that. There's some unemployed or financial people out there that would say, hey, give me $70,000, I'll pay you. Over $110,000 plus bringing this person back next year as a consultant. It's not logical. I don't understand it. But all of this is already automated.
And I'm just going to say, you're a very small amount of it. It's like just over $5,000 to buy that.
I agree. With all due respect, I
Let me
understand.
just finish. I mean, if you were to come in 4 days, that's going to be 8 days. The whole train's come. It's not a lot of money. It definitely is a full-time job, and then some. Roger works more than full-time right now. So.
It doesn't answer to the fact that we're going to take $587,000 in one shot.
Okay, any more questions from the general public or comments from the public?
I just have one question about the financial director. Have you done any sort of studies about what kind of savings or benefits that we get above and beyond, figuring out the numbers?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Reflecting the financial director, I would assume, is looking at cost saving measures and everything. Have you been able to put together any numbers that show what kind of benefits we got from having this position?
No, I don't think so.
It's a good point. I mean,
Right.
Roger definitely works
Right.
to save the county money.
I just have a couple comments and I have a question for the Board of Finance. What is the average assessed value in the town of New Hartford? Round numbers, I don't have a calculator.
I don't have a clue.
Okay, I'll.
I think Mr. Litchfield knows the number. I believe it's around 260,000.
260?
Is the average.
Okay, so $260,000, okay, is going to work out to about $15 a month for the New Hartford budget as proposed right now. So just make sure everybody understands, we're talking about $15 a month. Okay. The second comment I have, I would be very, very concerned just to see someone jump into a financial position of a $16 million company, okay? That would scare me, without the proper credentials and the background and everything else now to operate a company, okay?
Other comments? I see another one over here. So, any other comments before we move on?
Can we go back to the other Board of Ed?
Yes, we will. I was
At
going
the
to do
end?
that once
Okay.
we're wrapped
All right.
up here with this portion. So we've got all the comments. We're going to move on to the next section. Yes.
Why is the credits changing from 21 to 25? That is state law.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your presentation. It seems like we missed at least one or two people that had either a comment or a question on the local Board of Education school budget. So somebody over here, you had something.
Not a question, just a little speech, I guess you want to say. First, I want to thank the administrators, the teachers, the Board of Ed, and everyone who has put their heart and soul into making our schools excellent. They work very hard and are not thanked enough. So I want them to know how much I appreciate all they do for my children and for the students in our schools. Tonight I want to talk about two things, technology and education reform. First, technology. I've lived here for 6 years with a child in the school system for each of those years, and every year I feel inclined to defend technology. All the research is there. When used correctly, technology is a powerful tool for learning. It is akin to the use of textbooks, but unlike textbooks, technology is here to stay. It really boggles my mind when every year the plan for technology integration or improvement in our schools is questioned or considered for cuts. Whether it's a cut in staff, resources, or equipment, technology is always on the chopping block. We've asked the Board of Ed to move technology under capital expenditures. When I asked one board member to give me a comparison of what moving technology under capital expenditures would be like to other budget items, the example I was given is like it would be moving textbooks under that category. I'm hopeful you would never ask us to move textbooks under capital expenditures, so I'm asking you to do the same for technology. Technology is not a roof, it's not a boiler, it is a rapidly changing entity, and it is not, as one was quoted to me, a one and you're done item. Technology is in constant need of improvement, just like our curriculum, whether it's equipment, resources, or professional development for our teachers. My fear in moving this line item is that it will be the unlucky item that keeps getting pushed off year after year as it competes with other capital expenditures that have been passed over in years past. I recently taught a preschool technology class, and when I asked the group of 4-year-olds if they've ever used a computer before, not only had they used a laptop, but they've also used an iPad, an iPod Touch, a smartphone, and other new technologies. We need to keep pushing the technology envelope as we are with the new acceptable use policy for students of technology resources and the new technology plan presented to the Board of Ed, so that we challenge our students and give them the tools they need to succeed. Second, education reform. If you've been following the news, you know that Governor Malloy has deemed 2012 the year of education. His proposals are bold and call for a reform to education unlike anything the state has ever seen. While many of his initial proposals in the bill have been challenged or subject to ongoing debate, Governor Malloy has made it clear that some form of his original bill will be passed this year. That waiting any longer is only sentencing the children in our state to remain in broken schools that pale in comparison to other states. Connecticut has the largest achievement gap in the country, and without reform, we are going to continue to be held to the obscure standards of the unpopular fixation of test scores associated with No Child Left Behind. With education reform, we will be allowed the flexibility and relief to focus on innovation and achievement. While many of the governor's proposals on the table impact low-performing districts, of which we are not, thanks to the dedication of our teachers and our involved parents, education reform is a reality that we all need to embrace. Education reform is going to ask more from our administrators, more from our teachers, more from our support staff, more from our parents, and ultimately more from our students if we want them to be able to compete in a global economy. Or, as important, to ensure Connecticut has a competent workforce which makes it competitive in the marketplace, so that New Hartford is a place people want to bring their businesses to. And while I pray that our state and federal government will provide more funding for these much-needed enhancements to education, local districts need to be prepared to handle the impact. My oldest daughter has told us she's never going to leave New Hartford. She wants to live only here. She loves it here that much. So ask me if I want my grandchildren using 25-year-old desktop computers or reading ancient periodicals in the library. Ask me if I think my child is going to be standing here someday fighting even harder than I am for her own children's education. She ends up anything like me, I think you know the answer. If less than a 3% increase in the budget this year is asking too much, that you want less, please reconsider. Please honor the request of the Board of Ed. I don't believe they're being extravagant with this budget. They are mindful of the continuing struggles in the economy, but they are the experts. They know what our children need to be successful. Please pass this budget. Our children deserve it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on anything we've talked about so far before we move on to town government budget?
Ben, I'd just like to make one comment on what Dawn was saying. When the Board of Finance discussed where that $35,000 should be, whether it be in the operating budget or capital, I think it would be that suggested they move to capital. The reason why is with capital line items, they can be carried over year to year. So if the Board of Education had the opportunity to put the computers or whatever it was out to bid, they could take their time and get the best possible price. So there was no criticism where the money would sit, but it was my hope that they would end up being able to get a better value out of having it in capital. So that's the reason why it was put there.
But is that what I thought I heard that that's not where they prefer.
It was, the motion basically said that the Board of Finance would agree to a $175,000 capital line item dependent on the Board of Education moving that money to capital, and that's still a standing issue with this board, which we're going to have to discuss. But I just want to make sure you understood why that money was put there. It wasn't for any punitive reason or anything like that. It was to hopefully get the best bang for the buck, period.
The point that you're raising was also raised by the chairman of the Board of Education. We're going to touch on that as well as other things that we've heard tonight at our next meeting, and we'll have a board decision.
Thank you.
Before we go, I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge a constant person in our lives for almost 50 years. We have Anita and Bill Baxter, former first selectmen, or women, however you like to call them, Kate, Krieger, Reggie, myself. A lot of people have held different elected roles here, but to have somebody that's been a part of our lives for so long, and to take a moment to recognize that they may, depending on whether they're helping for a couple of days or may not be here with us next year, when the sole source of his obligation to his job has been to make sure that the best interests of our kids have been looked after. I think we'd be remiss if we did acknowledge Roger and his contributions to our community for how many years? 51 years to reach the second level. Budget season is always difficult, and everybody has to come to the grips of what they can and cannot afford, but I don't think we ever doubted Roger's commitment to Region 7 and the 4 towns that make it up in New Hartford. Obviously, we just have relied on you for so long, we're going to miss you. So thank you again for all your hard work.
All right, Dave, you got the floor.
Thank you. tried to follow Roger and Judy's lead here to jump into the modern era of technology, as Dawn is saying, and move all of our budget presentation onto a PowerPoint slide presentation. Everybody's been familiar with seeing this front page of our budget for many years, and the corresponding page that follows. It's about a 10, 11-page budget, of which 3 pages are not really included in the general government responsibility. The education page in there, although we pay that as pass-through, we have the boards that handle that, the debt service, and then the entirety of the capital is also outside of that. If you want to jump ahead. The summary with all factors are considered as the budget stands now is $22,306,107.63. It includes the outline of all the specifics here, which we're going to go through page by page. The one thing that I want to highlight for everybody here is that for everybody that was in the room that came to these budget presentations last year, if you look at the 4th column of money where it shows the actual request up here, I just want you to point up to here and look at the difference between these two numbers. From the 1011 to what we're operating in now, last year's budget represented a statistical zero. The actual increase to the general government budget was some $1,800. In that budget, no elected official received any type of pay increase, and we tried to keep everything to the minimum. The Board of Selectmen discussed the needs. We tried to keep the budget increase in the 1.5% range, acknowledging that by going to zero all the time, at some point you start doing harm to your infrastructure. So at this point, you can see when we're talking about large sums of money here, the sum total here is $67,446.43 to the operational portion of your budget. There is a small increase to the capital portion, which is $20,500, which we'll get to at the end of the presentation. But in the operational aspects of your budget, $67,000 is the net increase. Now, what I've done here is, when you look at it, what I've tried to do is highlight to keep to the board's 20-minute limit, which usually is a little trying for me. I tried to highlight the one item on every page that was the significant issue here. As I said before, no tax or no elected official received any type of pay raise last year. I renegotiated the contracts and in the process of trying to sign the dotted line for the DPW. The current contract and the increase that you'll see for the town government employees are based on 2.25%. Over the last 9 years, we've had increases that have averaged 3.7. Reflective of the times, I've negotiated increases that are substantially lower, and also you'll see the health insurance line item going down almost $34,000. That's part and parcel of them conceding to take a little bit less of a benefit in health care. What that number doesn't show you is that there's also an increase of about 5% in that line item, and one additional person on the plan, which costs about increase here is $37,000 for our highway department. Last year paving, and due to the cost of oil went up about 7 or 8%, we put a nominal increase into the paving line item, $1,000, $1,500 to keep up with paving the same amount of paving that we do over the last few years. That line item needs to be adjusted. The selectmen, Alicia, myself, Jack Casey, who is not here tonight, our goal when we go through these budgets, we look at 3-year rolling averages. We try to do our best to reallocate. But when you're in a difficult budget year like this, where there are other influences upon us, sometimes it's impossible to get to the idea. You know, we know and we recognize that in certain line items that we are expending, more money in specific line items, but it's just impossible to put more of an increase in there this year because we know that we need to do as much work we can with this little money. So you can see one attempt is the equipment maintenance line item where we bumped it from 58 to 68,000 to recognize that we are overspending. We have a lot of older equipment, which we're going to address in capital in terms of buying a new truck, but you can't solve all the problems with every line item in one budget year. Planning and maintain, and I said this since I've been first elected, is that it would be awful smooth for our community if we propose that when Bakerville expires, because then you could replace the one payment with another. So you have $106,250 between the two payments. If that were to come to pass and the community were supportive, when that expires, you could do it at a more affordable rate to our taxpayers. Again, then you see out a little bit down the road, the town hall project is getting ready to retire in 2019. That's the next time we're going to see some reduction in budget. It's actually quite substantial, $266,000. Commissions and other agencies, generally when I write letters to our department heads, I tell them to do the best they can to, look for savings. In terms of our commissions and other agencies, kind of tell them that basically this type of environment, we're looking to flatline expenditures, and the best thing to do is try to keep the status quo. The difference here, obviously, is you have your senior citizens, which is Jean, who's frequently here during the day, and then part of that is her salary, part of it is she does some maintenance. Not a whole lot of change. Capital allocation. We have, the selection have endorsed a 5-year capital plan for our town. We'll be putting it online. At our last meeting, the Board of Finance asked that we pull back $40,000 out of our request. We can go through from the top, you'll see that $53,000 allocation to the far right here. Our oldest plow truck is a 1994, closed in on 20 years. What we've done in years past is funded it as a single appropriation. You can see the last time we bought a truck was 2008, 2009. The actual purchase price of a big dump truck with the plows and all the attachments is about $150,000, and this would include a 3-year payment cycle for that. Show you a picture of it at the end of the presentation. Technology, as we heard a little bit of talk, technology in town hall is perhaps a little bit different, not necessarily the sum total of what you see in some of the education budgets, but we do cross budget years and pool the money. Currently, we have our email server, which is, I believe, a 2003 server that's going a major overhaul, and we did 4 computers. It was over $10,000. So having it in capital for the town hall makes sense to us, where it may be different, viewed differently from the Board of Ed. But fairly low expenditure as opposed to years past where larger numbers are done. We try to work within the specific application. Revaluation. Over here you can see that it's been done in the past. In the old days, we were revalued every 10 years. You kind of stuck with your home's value for a decade. Nowadays, the state has changed that system. They actually went to, I believe it was a 12-year revaluation cycle with a 4-year statistical analysis. They rethought that, and now they do 10 years with a 5-year statistical evaluation. We have bids in-house. We did trim this line item a little bit. We have a couple bids in-house that are in the $70,000 price range. We originally budgeted $80,000. The next 5-year cycle, we anticipate being roughly $200,000. This is one of those things that it's kind of a bitter pill, especially in a down economy, to have to spend this money, but it is required by state law. So that is where we're here. Parks and Rec capital, we have several portions to that in terms of municipal projects and Park and Rec that the selectmen have endorsed. We don't have a whole lot of issues that confront us as a town. One of the things that I've seen the most phone calls on, as I said earlier, was the parking on Central Avenue, that we believe that we can solve that problem with grant money. The second issue is we have the need for more field space for some of our youth sports, and an issue concerning with Brody Park South. The selectmen have identified the least contentious possible location for expansion to fields being behind Anthony School, and we have pursued that with $25,000 out of the $60,000 that you see in front of you years, you'll see over a little bit about the work we've done at Brown's Corner. I have some photographs. We are really closing in on successful completion of a project that started under Bill's watch and then moved through Earl and now to me. We get more positive comments on that renovation of that parking lot and now seeing it through the files of River John and everybody's happy with it. We do have successful completion of the roof job. We had a 6,400 square foot building up at the park. The roof nearly collapsed on it. We saved that structure. We are taking the asbestos out of it this week, and it offers a lot of unique opportunities for us. We want to do a little bit more work in terms of partitioning off an area for municipal storage of lawnmowers and things, so that if we have public going in there, we don't want them playing with tractors and lawnmowers and equipment that they shouldn't be dealing with. But we also want to make sure that the lighting is safe, the service is safe, and I've been told that a lot of the wiring is not up to par. So we want to take a look at that. We want to do some trail work. We also want to take care of Berkshire Hall in terms of painting. And the Rec Commission does want to take a look at the Brody House on the corner of West Hill and Niles. We talked about trying to improve septic service for some of the old cabins up there, and it turns out to be a very expensive, costly process when you deal with a facility by state law that uses an extensive amount of water on a daily basis. If you have a facility that uses in excess, I believe it's 3,000 gallons of water, you fall into heightened scrutiny beyond Farmington Valley Health. You go to Department of Public Health or even DEP, and the requirements for any septic system that then gets built escalates, which means it costs us all more. One of the ways that the Recreation Commission has thought about mitigating that is possible reconsideration of how and where we use the corner house there, the Brody House on the corner. So we're going to do a little bit of a study there to see if it's feasible to renovate that building for other uses. The selectmen have been pretty adamant that once the lease ends on the property, we will probably not be released. Moving down, town hall equipment replacement. A lot of this line item goes towards the heat pumps that you never see in the building. I think we just have a bill for one of them, almost $4,000. We have the tax collector office, the former probate office, and my office that the systems just don't respond. They leave Freon. You're getting to the point where the building's 10, 11 years old, and there are issues. The larger issue is the boiler down in the basement, which is also a source of concern. I think a couple years ago, it's a 9-section boiler. One section blew out, $3,000. Next line item down, box culverts and bridge improvements. Our bridges are evaluated by the state DOT every 2 years. They have identified some footing work on some of the bridges, more significantly on Steel Road, and other smaller issues on Maple Hollow. Another one on Black Bridge, where there are odds and ends that our guys just don't have the time to get to, or the technical expertise to sit down and get underneath the bridge and start doing footing work and things like that, where we can outsource some of the smaller jobs. Significant issue here is drainage. Many of you may or may not be aware, we did have a vote on a road project to take on the southern section of Steel Road, where we're going to do this summer, roughly a mile of entire repave of that section. Long thought to be the worst road in town, worst portion of the road. Steel Road is very long. But when you look at it, to put our crew down on that new drainage in that area, the normal rebuild of the road usually entails rebuilding 4, 5, 6 box culverts that are on catch basins on a street, which could take them 3 to 4 days. And when you talk about doing 6 or 7 on the road, there's just not enough hours in their week to rebuild this. To keep up with the pace that we're trying to set, they need a little bit of help. Another issue I'm going to show you an example in a picture here in a couple moments is that some of our cross pipes, these 36-inch or 40-inch concrete pipes that you drive over every day that look pretty sturdy from the pavement that you see, are actually collapsing from under. And one individual instance that I related to Board of Finance could be $20,000 per crossing. So when you look at a $60,000 allocation, the selectmen and myself, I wish we could afford to do more, but in the realm of we can only afford so much, This is the other half of the budget that people don't usually see, how the revenue comes into the town in terms of taxes, motor vehicles, past due taxes, fees and fines, all of the little revenues that come in that typically add up to about $5 million. The biggest, largest chunk of that that's most important to everybody in the room is ECS from the state, 3.1, almost 3.2 million that goes to support our school system, but it technically comes to the town, and then we send the checks to the schools monthly. So we do have some adjustments to make to this. The Board of Finance will consider the final changes. Everybody has the rights to appeal, and the assessor makes some adjustments at the last minute, and there will be some tweaks to this. The Board of Finance, and we have gone through at our last meeting, and made some subtle changes to try to get the best estimates we can to properly reflect what we have. We will be able to make one addition to this for FEMA reimbursement. Annie and Christine and I did finish a submission for $8,000 for the August storms. We'll have a second submission. They do refund us based on 75% of what they approved. So once the fellow from FEMA comes back out, checks all our work, then we'll know, but I think we'll be able to put something in the Board of Finance, we can discuss that during this meeting. All that goes through when you consider all the factors that go into it, all the education, all the general government, the capital, and you look at all of the expenditures, less revenues, and you find out exactly what you need to do. It comes down to this number right here, which is a 2.75% increase. The Board of Finance has worked hard to make adjustments where they can. As they said, in Ben's original presentation was on $100,000 of assessment. It was $65. So that's where it stands now. Obviously, this group will get together next week and consider all the factors and the input. If you send someone an email, send it to Ben, or any of the members could take an email and bring it to the board. And that will be the impact as the budget stands now. And a little things, obviously we've got the new projector. This was Brown's Corner, one of our current capital projects this time last year. You can see the parking improvements that were made, designed, as I said, under Bill's watch and passed through down to me. You can see the eyesore in the thing. Just scroll through a little quickly. This was the eyesore of sand that was left to us. It took quite a while to the downtown. I don't think anybody could foresee that was going to happen. The bill was removed on an extension of the agreement in place with Tim Trott, who lived up to his agreement, local resident, and now to go forward. You can see that all the fill is gone. That was about a week or so ago, a little more. You can see that now the parking has been completed. This was all done by town forces in an effort to keep the budget as tight as possible, by the stone from ONG, a little bit of processed gravel from Canton Village Construction, and then seeding out all that. So we're hoping for a little bit of rain here in the near future, so the grass will pop quite soon. The local kids, soccer starts, I guess, this Saturday, and baseball starts in another week or so. So Brown's Quarter is a much improved place. We get a lot of comments, a lot of things. The town was generous enough to support finishing out this project. We still have work to do with regard to all the handicap accessible ramps and sidewalks that will make the site plan complete. We are working towards that, and we are under budget as it stands now. We did, in an effort to improve conservation, we put in all new low-flow toilets in the bathroom this year for $2,000 because the well down there, because of the increased usage, has actually bottomed out 2 or 3 times over the last year. So we're trying to make adjustments to make sure that the facility can handle the population of the people of town, but it is stressed to the limit. That's another picture of the entire parking lot basically finished. Field house, as we said, last year, this year's budget, we nearly lost the roof on what was these flatter sections. We put in and hired a local contractor to bid on the job. Ed Kostak put in engineered trusses, raised and pitched the roof. maintenance at our town garage and what it costs us every year. This is the oldest truck in the fleet, followed by a 1997 truck. Has long served the town, but in an effort to try to modernize and, increase reliability, we'd like to replace this with a new 2012. As I said, it's $53,000, 3 payments to replace this truck.
53,000 times 3.
Times 3, that's right. The truck itself is about $150,000 estimate from the authorized dealer in this area is Morolla International Dealer, who gave us the estimate. This is the example of the drainage situation that I've been telling you. This is Woodchuck Lane on the southwest side of town. You drive over this and get opportunity to go to that side of town. It looks fine from the top, but if you look at the next slide, you'll see what the town crew guys see is that, first and foremost, the concrete is basically done, and then the pipe is actually disconnected and separated in near black stage. So it's been there, that's a 40-foot or a 40-inch pipe, concrete, and the estimate on just this single crossing is just about $20,000. Okay, so here's a little synopsis summary of what's going on. Overall increase in spending to general government is about $88,000. As you can see, $67,000 in the operational side, $20,000 in capital. What makes up the majority of the operational increases? Salaries at $33,000 with the one single allocation for public safety, the troopers being $13,000. Everybody else in town is about $20,000. Communications, the line item that we tried to restore, was over $8,000 a couple years ago. Pension contribution, $9,500. Your pension that goes towards existing employees has been modified. New employees, as our pension board is in the final steps of doing, new employees will move to a 401k type system. They will participate. The old defined benefit plan no longer exists for new employees. Existing employees that will promise that benefit will gain that benefit. But we have negotiated that out and congratulate Dr. O'Reilly and the Board of Ed for following through and adding that to their bargaining units. Eventually, we will have to have a town meeting to restate the benefit plans, but these are negotiated in their contract. Our contracts are done, highway and the town hall employees. That's the only ones that I mentioned. So, right now as it stands, our pension fund, which is about $1.9 million, represents only about 60% of the actual value it needs to pay everything. That was part of the reason why moving in a different direction, and thus the reason why we see significant increases. Elections, you can see we talked about, this is a presidential year. Libraries, highways, net of the salary increase, it makes up the bulk of it, along with the salaries, 38 salaries on the highway, and then some smaller items for about $16,000. Sum total of increases in spending, $115,000, offset by some savings. Health insurance going down 34, the dump up there 2,000, zoning a little bit of savings, unemployment compensation 5,000, and some smaller items saving us 48,000, with the net being about 67,000. I was round a little bit, so I couldn't get to the exact 446,000. Outside of that, you have capital increase about $20,000 going up, and you have some savings in your debt service, about 15,000 going down. It's kind of a wash. So, sum total, like I said, change about 67,000 operations, 20,000 with capital. Any questions? Everyone has a buzz back to that slide.
And actually, what part of my question made a comment in that section that an increase is happening. I'd just like to explain what you meant by that.
We have 2 state troopers. If you followed any of the politics of the state, when the governor did his request for concessions, the state troopers union voted against that request. So one of your 2 state troopers is at a point in his career in his union contract where he is stepping through a similar jump to what happened last year. So his salary increase is going to be over $10,000 in this 1 year. The second shop and the phone rings with something that is more of a emergency nature, that speed trap for the day is over. You know, we don't have a legal conforming police department here, so by law, when they process prisoner, they drive to game. You know, that's a 40 to 45, even if it's state trooper speed, that's a 40-minute trip. Yeah, and they can do what they want. We don't have to drive under the law. So they are busy and they are stretched. I think they do great work. But I think that in coming years we will be tested if the economy stays slow to add another police.
Other questions?
Comments and questions. I thought the budget presentation was great. I think Jim raised some good questions about the regional budget, probably a little tweaking to be done there. But everything is a budget to budget. Is the number of 155,000 down here, is that the actual that's moved over to cover from one year to the next on the revenue side?
What page are you on?
I'm on
Oh, you're on the revenue page?
Yeah.
That's actually an increase of 155,000 over and above what we did last year. If we roll over what we normally roll over, the number was somewhere around 145,000. So we had that.
You had that to spare from the actual versus the budget last year.
Right.
Okay.
145.
So that's what
over.
we're doing.
We add 155 to it to get to the $300,000 that's in there.
There has been some discussion about within the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen is how much surplus is enough. In past years, you've heard ratios of 10 to 12% of budget being appropriated. We did slide up in terms of a couple of years back when we reduced the collection rate under fear of the economy really going bad. We reduced the collection rate down to 96%, and we ran a huge process of things came up. So 2 years ago, there was actually $355,000, an attempt to use $355,000 from fund balance to give that back to people and reduce the tax increase. But because we ran such a surplus, we never actually took that back. So that money remained in there. It doesn't look like we're going to use those 145.
We have increased the collection rate up to 97.5. And the Steel Road project that I think you mentioned is coming out of surplus, 120,000.
225,000. Part of which is the CRA settlement. Part of it.
So we're still in pretty good shape, okay? They're also, the numbers that our auditor tells us, we're asking where you should be, the numbers are all over the place, but they're inching up. We're in fine shape with this. We could do another project if we want. The problem with taking that money and putting it into the budget is you create a hole for the next year because you just don't have that money. It's not something that replenishes itself every year. So we're a little cautious about putting a lot. 155,000 seems to be a pretty good number.
What is the undesignated cash balance to the town right now? What percentage?
14%.
14%.
They've changed the terminology just a little bit, but it's so if you look at the salary report, it's not undesignated reserve, they call it something different.
Right, it's cash available to the town. And that's a pretty darn good number. Why can't, would the board consider on those one-time capital expenditures, pay it out of cash? Because it reduces the budget and there's no rollover because next year that item may not be in the capital plan. But at 14%, that's taxpayers' money sitting there, not doing very much. That probably could be lower because the town is in really good shape. But if you took it against the one-time capital expenditures here, you'd reduce the tax increase that much. And it wouldn't affect next year's budget because it's a cash. It's a one-time cash expenditure for one-time capital expenditure. So it does reduce obligation to taxes. And you still have an undesignated cash surplus pretty high. It's never going to be tapped.
I would agree with you if the capital expenditure, one-time capital expenditure was above our average expenditures. But in my mind, we're going to be at that $270,000 to $300,000 a year, just keeping keeping up on things.
It doesn't change.
That's why we've done the things that are really outside, like the Steel Road project. Taking the surplus, we're only into our second year of increasing the collection rate, okay, that we put in the budget. So that's decreasing the number that's going to be rolling over from prior years. And we've taken an additional $155,000. So if you take a look at it, we're going to be taking $375,000 out of there, okay, between the projects we've already authorized and this budget year.
And this on the heels of buying a new road grader last year, doing Steel Road. There are target ways to do it. The more you put that money into the budget, when it goes away, the next year, if the project requests come in, big tax increase.
I understand that, Dan, but the point of the matter is you're sitting at 50% of taxpayers' money, not doing anything, and that catastrophe of that size will never happen. And if it does, FEMA or the state or your bonding situation, which is really good, can handle that. But I think that's excessive, and I think there's a way to use it and keep taxes down by doing this.
14% is just so you understand. 14% was the end of the last fiscal year. Since then, we've authorized the two projects that we talked about. It takes it through $75,000. Your point's still valid. I don't know what that takes it down to. It's probably somewhere like 13%. There's still a little bit of room there to do something like this again. Anything else? Any other comments?
I have a question on all that. How much is left in our surplus fund? In cash, not this, how much money do we have sitting in surplus that, like a rainy day fund, I understand that?
Between 3 and 3.5.
And what do we do with that? I'm assuming it's invested in what?
It's invested safely. We'll call it invested.
It's sitting in a savings account? That's what
Our funds have been changed over the last year. We've moved our banking relationship from Bank of America, who broke up with us and left town. We had a lengthy research project. Gordon Ross, our treasurer, led the charge to evaluate all competing options. At the end of an exhaustive search and talking with everybody here, we did move all of our funds to Northwest Community Bank. So that's where our funds are invested through Carol Monroe, who's in town hall frequently. We don't invest money in risky situations. Gordon probably give you a brief outline of how he does it and transfers it. Don't forget, we do have obligations where we only collect half of the taxes, twice a year, and we do send sizable checks to Region 7 monthly to the tune of $800,000 a month. So it dwindles quickly. But
the cash flow, we'll have, because of that, we'll have time, we're down closer to $1 million, and sometimes it's up to $6 million. So Gordon, is it CDs? Just real quickly on the investment.
There's an investment account which is actually managed by Northwest Community, which they pay us interest. So it's a sweep account, which is not going to be in all details. The thing that I would point out is the fact that Northwest actually takes and dedicates assets, so we're not just part of the balance sheet of Northwest or the bank, whereas we used to be. So if the bank went under, we were exposed. Now they're dedicated assets set aside for us. And they're CDs. They're all very short-term interest-bearing certificates, no stocks, no long-term bonds, nothing, no instrument whose prices can go up or down. So we're required by state laws to invest very conservatively. As everybody in this room probably knows, those sort of investments don't pay very much. We started out, it was at 0.9%, now we're down to 0.5% because interest rates continue to trail down. But it's much better than we were doing before.
Before I forget, I want to just touch on a couple emails that have come in. We've got somewhere between 6 and 8 emails from people supporting the Angelini Field expansion and the field house rehabilitation that they talked about in this field budget. But just quickly, in general, we follow this tone. It's apparent that taxpayers of Hartford are requesting you do not make any cuts to the Angelini Field expansion or the field house rehab projects due to the projects are long overdue. The expansion of NCAA should relieve some of the unrest about youth football, while the field house completion will eliminate a lot of the cost of renting basketball facilities from the towns. Completion of both these projects will provide benefit to the town. This one is from the Conley family. I got another one that is extremely small font, so I'm going to have a hell of a time reading it. It's from Laura Sundquist. She asked me to read this at the meeting here. Laura Sundquist is a former board finance member. First, thank you for your service. You're working with the Board of Education, Board of Selectmen, reviewing and understanding the budgets presented to you. As a former member of the Board of Finance and current CPA, I'm well aware of the challenge you face presenting the budget to the people of New Hartford to vote on. Balancing the act of overseeing the budget process for the next year and trying to keep tax increases at a minimum requires thoughtful listening and planning. The job of the Board of Finance is to present a fair and equitable budget to the people of New Hartford. Given that, both long-term and short-term goals and consequences need to be addressed. Currently, we have an excellent reputation in our schools, higher than average property value, a state-of-the-art library, great parks and recreation, safe community, etc. I think most residents consider New Hartford to be a great place to live. How can we continue to enjoy those benefits if once again the Board of Finance is insisting on a 0% budget increase? Is that really the best long-term interest of the people of New Hartford? As much as I don't enjoy paying higher taxes, the long-term effect can be very detrimental to the residents of New Hartford. I fear that we are on our way to damaging the infrastructure of our schools and community. How can our property values stay at current levels if we're not willing to invest in technology or acknowledge the changing times to keep up with it? Are we that selfish that our only concern would be to keep our property taxes down and not reinvest in the future of our children? For more assignments. And again, we did vote for a 0% tax increase, and you've heard from the Board of Education that the cuts that we did direct, the $70,000 we did direct, will not likely result in a layoff. Any other questions? Yes.
First, I want to tell you that I really appreciate the presentations from all of the boards. I thought they were very well done, and I certainly appreciate the atmosphere here of encouraging questions. That's great. Back to that issue of the capital expenditures budget, I'd like to recommend that the Board of Finance consider setting a percentage that the cash should represent for the future. Should it be 10%, 11%, 12%, but it certainly shouldn't be 13 or 14%. It is, I think it is too high.
We've had that discussion at some of our meetings. We have debated that around, but not finalized a rate.
Good.
We've been
Good,
pulling
and
hard.
then you can, if some year you find it's again, you can fund some of those capital expenditures out of that and not affect the budget increase for the future years. So setting that up and maybe putting that in a guideline for future boards of finance. In the past, we've done that sort of thing, and then those guidelines get lost.
It simplified the process, because then you know the number before you start the debate. You say, look, we've all commonly agreed that it should be whatever that number is. So we have discussed that.
Good, thank you.
Question. Those monies we have invested, are those equal to your FDIC protected?
They don't need the FDIC protected because they're not invested in the bank. So I said, they're segregated assets. We have a legal claim. We get a letter every day in the mail telling us what those assets are invested in and what percentage ownership we have. Just as if you own a mutual fund, we own these assets. They're separate from the bank. FDIC insurance is guaranteed by the federal government, as you know, for your deposits in a financial institution if that financial institution goes bankrupt. Northwest goes bankrupt, our assets are, we have a legal purchase on those assets, which are segregated from their balance sheet.
Anything else?
I just want to be clear, all the
see a zero in the field house, but is there anything in that 50,000 is left? that
Yes,
goes over?
it is. We tried to put in, we didn't address the title of that next line item, but we put all recreation-oriented projects, be they rec commission or municipal projects that I do, under one thing, so people can see the sum total of everything that went into a recreational-oriented project as a single dollar figure.
But do we know what that number is that's going to roll into the field house?
20,000.
So out of that 50, we're saying there's going to be 20 that's rolling in there. That's not spending that we'll have available from last year, right? I'm sorry, for this year. Okay. All right, so we'll have that 20,000. What I'd like to know is just to make sure that for, the football league in Antonini, I would like to see that 60,000 change to 35,000 and to show the 25,000 on a separate line item to Antonini. So at some meeting when we're at 11 o'clock at night, the Board of Finance doesn't say, cut 50,000 out of the Park and Rec capital. Not realizing that we just killed the program and what we're doing for the football. So I would like to see these things itemized in detail because I'm supporting it and I want to make sure that somebody doesn't go and cut these items and kill them.
We have a 5-year capital plan, year by year, that's approved, that's going to be on the town's website. We haven't gone through and actually posted online yet, but we made the specific adjustments. And in those 5-year capital plan, it's specific to the dollar, which I provided with you guys in the last meeting.
I'm just saying from this standpoint, we don't have the detail. We need to see
I
it.
could add the 1-year capital plan to something.
Okay.
Steve, you have a question?
Thank you all again for the hard work. And a little bit of exposure to the kind of things that are very little, nothing here with you guys. I can't thank you enough for what you do. That being said, I want to note that some comments that you were talking about the NCD project, right? And what's going into that. We're talking about football and its use of that deal in the expansion. But this isn't just for football. This is going to help relieve a lot of the pressure that's currently on Rouse Corner with 2 different soccer leagues, 3 different baseball leagues that meet all currently as well as football and any future expansion into sports that could cross the field. In addition to trying to set up a actual legitimate sized softball field so the girls can have something and potentially I'd like to see adult rec sports as well. An adult rec softball would be great for this now. Further, we're exporting all of our adult rec sports, all of them. There's not any fit for this happening. And there's no reason for that. Kind of like NewHartford that should provide recreational sports for the adults and the adults.
The plan that I have, until the budget passes, I haven't wanted to spend any money on engineering, because I don't want to set money aside that would be used elsewhere, is to, if anybody's familiar with that, in the location of the ropes course to the west of the Anthony Field, to go into the woods there 150, 160 feet, to expand solve this, if we could solve the parking issue on Central Avenue, I think we could do it in a cost-effective way. It's going to take a year, perhaps two, to get in terms of excavating. There might be a little ledge in there that has to be blasted out, but in terms of fencing off.
Any other questions or comments before we wrap it up?
I'd like to add something onto what Jim said, which I think is absolutely the way it should be, that projects and recs should be broken down, so they know exactly what's been allocated there, so everybody knows what's going on with that. I'd like to add one more level, which would be to actually have money allocated for each park. And I know I've said this before during our Board of Finance meeting, but I'd like to see at least a $5,000 amount for each park every year, just to have it there available to do the little jobs that the parks need, so that they don't reach this big, where they really have a huge need, and you have to put in 30,000-40,000. So I'd like to make a pitch for that, because there are two competing needs there, and you need to see one be ignored, because the other need is so great at this time.
Well, obviously, we're going to address all the things from the public, plus any last minute pitches from the Board of Finance and individual members before we go on to the hearing. Any other questions before we adjourn? Thank you very much for attendance, excellent attendance.
Thank you.